Hello everyone, this is Daryl. How you doing? And today I braved the cold weather here in Michigan. It was actually about 24 degrees outside, but I was laying on the ground and it ended up being pretty cold out there after 3.5 hours of a job that should have been 1 hour on the flat rate manual. And some of it was because I didn't know what I was doing, and part of it was because of the part I bought to replace what I was fixing with. Let me show you what happened. We were replacing the steering shaft on the, well, you know by the title of the vehicle what I was doing. We were replacing the steering shaft on the 2007 Lincoln Navigator. And we replaced it with this one here, which I purchased on eBay for like $63, which is about quarter of the price for a new Ford brand one, a genuine Motorcraft part. And it seems to work okay. I mean, it was a nice, solid, heavy-duty, quality part. The problem came when it came down to tighten it down. The original one, let's see, we got the upper and lower. This is the upper here, and this is the lower here. On the original one, the lower one had a 10mm bolt, and the upper bolt was 13mm. On the new one, both of the bolts were 14mm. And what I found to be the problem was, I imagine they did that because it was such a robust, bigger bolt, but on the bottom side here, this bolt head got awful close to that little embossed hump in the coupling there, and it made it very difficult to get the socket onto that bolt, because once it got down to a certain point where it was starting to get tight, the socket didn't fit between the bolt head and the shape of the fitting there. And it's almost impossible to actually get a wrench on it. You can't get a ratcheting wrench on it at all, because again, even a closed-end boxed-end wrench you can't get on it, because there's no room between the 6-point bolt and that little rise behind it. So the only option is to get it as best you can on an angle from the front. And I got it tightened down until the lock washer closed, but I wasn't real happy with not being able to torque it down to the full 22 pounds it's supposed to have. The top one's rated at 30 pounds for the factory. And I have no idea what the torque specs would be on the bigger bolt for the replacement part, but if you're looking on eBay to buy one and you see this one here from Topics AP, I would steer clear of this one. I would look for a different one. If you can't afford the Motorcraft one, which is what I would recommend to get, there's lots of other ones to choose from. See if you can pick one where it tells you what size bolts they use in it, and don't get one with 14mm bolt heads on the bottom at least, and that should help make your installation a lot easier. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this job would cost between $400 and $600 if you took it to a shop and had it done, and the flat rate is 1 hour's worth of labor. And say, first time I did it, took me a little over 3 hours, but with the right tools and the right part, I think I could have did it in probably an hour and a half. Oh, the other one little trick I want to mention too is when you're putting it all back together, start with the bottom fitting. The bottom fitting, get that set in place and bolted down first, and then it's going to make the rest of the job a lot easier. A lot of this was about having the right tools, which I didn't have for this job, and having the right part, which I really don't feel I had for this job. But it got the job done. And let me just show you the old one here and a couple more tricks. These are the tricks. I did get tricks for you guys that you will learn here to make this job easier for you. Now here's the let's shoot better light. Here's the old one, the original part, the Ford part. And you can see, I don't know if you can see in that, we're trying to get, see how floppy that is right there, how much play there is in that swivel right there. It was very hard to keep the car straight going down the road. So I had sprayed it over the years with PB Blaster and white lithium grease to keep it from seizing up, which it had partially seized up a few years ago. And I was able to get a couple more years out of it by oiling it on a regular basis. But now it was time to just move on and replace it. The other thing I recommend for anyone doing this is get a screwdriver or a pry bar on your new part before you try to install it, and drive it into this gap right here to spread that arm out before you even think about trying to install it. That will make it so much easier to slide this into place for you. And then same thing on this one here. Get your pry bar or screwdriver, drive it into that crack right there, that gap. give it a couple good whacks with a hammer so it wedges in there nice and tight and spreads that open a little bit. Make it so much easier to put your replacement part on. Alright, when I started taking this apart to show you what to do, I decided to show you how to remove the top trim panel and intake tubing to get more access to the steering shaft area. But come to find out that really isn't necessary. It doesn't really gain you any extra space, and I ended up doing it without removing this stuff in the long run. The bottom bolt needs to be removed while laying on your back under the car and reaching up and around the power steering pump with an extension on the end of your ratchet handle. So you don't need to take off any of this stuff on top. Alright, I put it up on ramps. Now the first step is going to be to turn the wheel. You haven't taken anything apart yet, but if you turn the wheel so that the top nut is facing the outboard side of the car, almost but not quite plane with the ground, that'll set the lower one in a position so that the nut is just on the inboard side of the power steering hydraulic line, and you'll be able to reach it by laying on your back, sticking your hand up underneath in front of the power steering pump with a long extension and a 10mm socket, and you can get it from the bottom by reaching up around through the front of the power steering pump. Once you get the bottom one off, leave it attached, and then come back up here and rotate your steering wheel so that the nut is, or the bolt is facing straight up in the air, and I can just go straight down on it like this with a long extension. And before I take this top bolt off, I'm going to resecure that steering wheel with the bungee cord like I showed you here. Alright, we've set the steering wheel in the straight ahead position, and we've secured it to the handle hold here so that it can't accidentally turn while we're working underneath, because if it turns too much while you're under there, it will ruin the clock spring inside of the steering column. And once this bolt's off, we'll slide it downward and then use the end that's up here in the air as like a slide hammer and pull the whole thing off the shaft. See if I can get down in there and show you the new part there. I would love to show you the other end of it, but I don't know if I can.